Sarah, hi. It's so nice to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you too, Pete.
I really appreciate you giving me some time.
Of course, of course.
So, the usual starting point, you're a type 1 diabetic. I'm a type 1 diabetic. This is all about type 1 diabetes. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Oh my God. I feel so old. But I got my type 1 diabetes diagnosis when I was 13 years old. Um, I wasn't aware of what type 1 diabetes was. I know that my classmate's sister um, had to take like injections
Mhm.
because she was a type 1D, but I didn't really know, and I wasn't so interested in getting to know what kind of diagnosis she had or
Mhm.
how her life was. But um, she, I was drinking so much water, and they noticed. And one day, my classmate told me like, "Oh my God, we are going to do something fun with my sister. We are going to take a blood sugar test." And I was like, "Oh my God, what are you saying?" Like, I'm not sure if I want to do it, but I might be the last person to try.
Yeah.
So all my like three or four friends was testing the blood sugar. Um, and then it was my turn, and I walked out of the room. I was like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
I I'm too afraid. And today I can think about that situation that okay, I was so scared because I already knew that something was wrong with me, and I didn't want to have like a recipe with my friends, like because I'm a person who cries a lot. But a few days later, my classmate's mom called my dad and was like, "Okay, I'm sorry to say, but I think Sarah has type 1 diabetes."
Oh, wow.
And my dad is a doctor,
Yeah.
and he told me one morning, like, "Okay, you are not going to school today. You are following me to the hospital, and yeah, I think you have diabetes." And I was like, he was like, "Pack your bag with a few stuff, a few clothes, and it will be all fine." So that's
Wow.
the background story.
Luckily, someone made that call. That was nice of your friend, I suppose, to pick up the phone. I wonder what
Yeah,
would have happened if they hadn't made the call.
not sure. And I don't
Um,
want, I think I would have freaked out, and they would
yeah,
too.
I
I
guess
mean, what,
the symptoms would have got to a point where you couldn't ignore them, right?
yeah. But when I came to the hospital, they couldn't even measure my blood sugar because it was too high.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think I was really sick for maybe a year. It was like it was a long time. I was feeling really, really bad.
Oh, you mean a year leading up to the test you were
Yeah.
sick you were sick for? What sort of symptoms?
Like I wasn't getting my period.
Yeah.
I was like losing my sight, like
Yeah. Yeah.
my
Yeah.
eyes,
Yeah.
yeah, couldn't see, and I was drinking a lot, and I was up at night like 7 times to go to the bathroom, and I was drinking so much Coke,
Yeah.
regular Coke, because I
Yeah.
was so thirsty. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that. I remember going to work in the mornings and I'd stop at the shop that made like fresh fruit juice and I'd get like a massive cup of fruit juice and I would just sit at my desk and I would just drink the whole thing straight just because I was craving that kind of water or that, liquid and, cold, sugary kind of liquid. It was,
The
I
crazy
really had
part
no idea.
when you're drinking so much, you only want more.
Yeah.
It doesn't help if you drink.
Yeah. So do you remember what it was like? Because you were 13 years old, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember what was on your mind? Like what, as a young teenager, I was 30 years old when I got diagnosed. So I think that there's some benefit in that because it's probably easier as an adult to process and manage, right? But
Yeah.
I feel for kids because it's, there's a lot going on anyway, right? As a 13-year-old, there's a lot going on. It's a complex time. It was for me anyway. And I can just imagine that if I had got it when I was a kid, it really would have just added like another layer of complexity to what's already a, confusing period in your life.
Yeah. And you want to fit in together with your friends, and you want to be one of the cool guys. And when you get like a diagnosis like diabetes, and you have to have your own routines and to take your like insulin, and you have to measure your blood sugar, like you are not one of the like normal friends anymore. Like you can feel like an outsider.
Yeah. Is that how you felt, or do you remember what was the experience as a teenager?
So I think I was at the hospital for almost a week. And when I came back, my classmates and friends was like, "It's so cool. Can we have a look when you're taking your syringe?" Like your injections before lunch. So they were really like helpful. And I remember that I was having a meeting with a dietitian, and she was like asking what I was having, like, and ask my parents as well, like what we were having for kind of food and dinner and so on. And she was like, "Okay, you are having like regular food, home cooked food, so you don't have to change anything. The only thing is that you have to take your insulin before you eat." And so it wasn't that much change, I think. And the friends, the people around me was very like genuine, had a genuine interest in my disease.
That's nice. So it wasn't a negative experience for you then. It wasn't, it didn't make life more difficult, other than, the practicalities of it. But emotionally, like, it was a fairly positive experience.
It was the first few days at the hospital. I remember that I was like, okay, and the doctor was like, "You have to take your shots every day for the rest of your life." And I was like, to hear that at the age of 13 is like, what is the meaning of life? I mean, can I still do stuff I want to do, and I have so many things I'm dreaming of doing. And I guess that my parents were very positive that if I'm learning to handle and manage my diabetes, I can still live a kind of a normal life. And they were pushing me to like meet friends and have sleepovers just to get to learn myself to do it by myself, because I'm not going to live with my parents for the rest of my life. So they knew that one day Sara is moving out and she has to like do it for her own one day.
A lot of that experience is influenced by the people, right? So by I suppose the doctors that are treating you or are helping you manage, the people in your life, your friends and family, because I do hear different stories from people who have had, initially for some reason, a negative experience with a doctor or a nurse who, I think one of the stories that I heard recently was maybe about a nurse who was very adamant that this particular type 1 diabetic person had to have very strict diet. And that kind of led to, just more difficulties, like I think the type of advice and the support that you get at that stage really will have an impact on, how you kind of go through that initial process of diagnosis.
And I think that this is like 19 years ago, so social media like didn't even exist, which I'm happy for, and which makes me worried about how things are today, because now on social media you can see diets everywhere. You can see you should be eating this, you shouldn't be eating that. don't do this, do that, and so on. And it's like, it's a crazy world. And I think that it's so easy today to follow into something that could be very unhealthy for you.
That's a pretty good segue, actually. And it was a question I was going to get to later on, but seeing as though it was such a good segue, I think that, and it's one of the things that comes across very clearly in both your blog and your general presence online, your social media profile, etc. And I think that is, you know, the messages that are out there and how we relate to food and the psychology of food. And I think that probably social media, you know, it's not something that I have a problem with, but certainly there's probably a lot of mixed messages out there in the world of food. And I suppose when you're a diabetic, you know, the relationship with food is already complex. And I'm curious, you know, given that you, I think, are pretty open about, you know, food and your relationship with it, I'm really curious to kind of understand a bit about that journey. And did it start from that when you were 13? Did, you know, was food already a thing that was like quite high on your mind at that stage? And then did diabetes make it more complex, or was it the other way around?
No, it's the other way around. And I'm happy because as I said before, like my parents were they cooked all the food, because my first part, I am also having celiac, so I can't eat wheat. And my brother was allergic to eggs and how do you say, milk and fish. Wow. So they already had like problems with food. So they like always cooked food from the start. Yeah. And so I'm grown up with like potatoes, meat, sauce, maybe a carrot, like just the green. and later on, when I started like blogging about it and starting to show my curves, I saw that people want to see straight curves, and that led me to cut out like carbs, sugar, and I was in a really bad relationship at that time. So, and I saw that my curves are getting better when I'm not eating. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I like how you use the term curves. It's a nice way to put it. No, it's actually, yeah, it makes sense. It makes total sense. It's a nice way to put it.
It's so like sweet. How do you say Swedish English?
Yeah, it's good. I like it. So, tell me a bit more about that. Tell me a bit more about that, about the, you know, curves and what it means. And I suppose it's, you know, it is. I don't know if I want to say it's specific to women, because I'm sure there's men who, but it's probably less common for men to have that, you know, concept of. I mean, but you know, there's certainly plenty of mixed messages out there about what a man's body should look like as well. But I think generally there's probably you know, if we were just talking purely percentage wise, that there's probably more women that are focused on their curves.
Yeah, and I think today it's really like, it could be dangerous because it's so much on social media. You see all those like influencers, they are looking like a perfect person, and they are having a pasta and they are so skinny, and like this is totally bullshit. Like, and I feel like it is possible to, that's why I'm wanting to show on my social media today that it is possible to eat pasta, it is possible to eat carbs and food you actually like and still manage your blood sugar. It is possible. You have to give it a little bit of a time. Like you have to get to learn how your own body is working with food, with emotions, with weather, whatsoever, with your relationships. And I feel like people are so, I don't want to put anyone in the corner or talking like that about any like persons or so, but I have the feeling that people are so afraid of like trying new things to see outside the box.
Yeah. Yeah,
And I felt,
there's certainly, I've, having worked in the area, I've been lucky to kind of interact with such a, an array of people with diabetes. And I think you even allude to it in the content in your blog and social media around like how individual it all is, right? And how individual your experience is and how you can't really generalize. But certainly there is the more pedantic end. It's a spectrum, right? Like there's the more pedantic end where there's people who are very strict on their own diet. And that's not just diabetes, right? That's in general.
yeah,
I suppose in diabetes, maybe you've got a bit more drive to do it because you've got a greater purpose, which is,
yeah,
food does influence your diabetes significantly. And so you've got more of a motivation to go and control that a lot more.
yeah, totally. And yeah, and I feel like that's why I'm trying to talk about more and more that we have to have our like healthcare system needs to be more individualized. How do you say?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Because you can't, as a doctor, say that okay, you should be eating this, and this works, and like no, it maybe don't do for me, but I'll try, and if it doesn't, I'll maybe change something.
Yeah,
But I
they're
feel like
definitely. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, no, sorry.
No, look, I think there is definitely. I've come across the odd, older school style endocrinologist who, or nurse, and I think even one of the nurses when I first got diagnosed. It's, I have sympathy because working in healthcare, you're seeing patients all day, and so the energy that would be required to really invest in an individual and like, so commendable, right? To diabetes nurse specialists. But it must be difficult to really sit and listen and like really give like individual advice to every single person because
Yeah, of
the
course it
energy to go into that. And
guidelines and how you say those guidelines to a person who just got diagnosed, for
yeah,
example.
yeah.
I mean, you can say one thing in like 5 different ways, and like you have to feel how the other person in front of you are like feeling. And that's why I've been changing hospitals a few times because I've been having doctors that are like so like, oh my God, you can't eat French fries, and oh my God, you can't have wine, and you can't. And I was like, wait a minute, my A1C is perfect. My
Mm,
values are like perfect.
yeah.
For me, it is.
We'll get into
And
perfection later.
yeah, and like, why should I cut off food I really like? And they're like, well, in like we in the like textbook, we don't recommend. And I was like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I think it's right. It's true, and and I get where they're coming from with that, and you can't argue with it. But
Of course.
I mean, I think again, healthcare workers they train as scientists, right? And
Yeah.
they're good at science, but I don't think I don't think there's a lot of time spent with doctors, for example, on interpersonal communication or in like coaching people, and some just naturally are good and some naturally aren't that good and they're
Yeah.
just about the science. And so I'm really grateful, I suppose, to have such a great healthcare system and to have, I love our doctors and nurses and that community. I'm so supportive of them, especially at times like this. But certainly, yeah, I think that, and it's improving, right? It's definitely getting better. I think that the new generation of healthcare workers are a little bit more cognizant of like situations like this and knowing the science, but realizing that the science is only relevant to the person that's interpreting it.
Yeah, definitely.
So back to, I suppose, food and psychology. So you were saying that that it was the diabetes that kind of was the instigator for what complexities psychologically for you and the way you thought about food?
Well, I think that when I can't like blame my diabetes for my psychological like issues or problems.
Mm.
I think there's so much more than just that. Of course, it's a part of it, but as I said before, I was in a relationship I wasn't like happy about, and I didn't notice myself at first. And then I had a few like relationship like problems with them. Like when family members like you don't really know, and for myself like I was having questions like, who am I, what am I going to do with life, what is life, the meaning of life, and I was thinking so much, and then to have control over something, my
Mm-hmm.
diabetes. And when I noticed that like when I didn't eat, then my blood sugar and my diabetes was pretty good. And it's scary because I was losing my social life, my friends. I was losing my job. And I didn't want to see how bad it really was. I just wanted to be at home and sleep.
The impact on work and friendships, was that coming from the need to control and thinking that, if you were out socializing, that it was harder to control?
Yeah. And it was so hard because with social life, it is like food are included, drinks are included, and talking about life and how everyone was talking about their like happy life, and they like their jobs and the salary and boys and and then I thought that it was so hard because I was like single, lost my job, had relationships problems, and I was like, I don't want to be there. I don't want to be there with them and be the person who also has diabetes. I don't want to be that person. And I didn't really like myself and how the person I saw in the mirror. Oh, this is really to saying it out loud. Yeah.
It's incredibly brave, and I mentioned to you earlier, but it's really courageous, I think, to have these conversations and for you to be open and transparent in the way that you talk about it on social media. It's a really positive thing.
Yeah.
I think, but I can imagine, yes, I can imagine saying that stuff out loud, even though you have, in some ways come to terms with it. It's still, I think whenever you say those things out loud, those things that are difficult in your life, there's always a moment, isn't there?
Yeah.
So what age was this?
It was I was 24, 25. So pretty old to be like, like having, if you are looking at like eating disorders in general, it's almost like in younger ages. But then you actually see that today that people who are over 25 is getting the same issues. And yeah.
And have you come across it in the community? Is it something that you're talking with other diabetics about? Are you getting people responding to the content you're putting out there and saying, thank you, I'm a diabetic and I've had similar experiences? Yeah.
And I feel like it's so hard because when I was like in hospital for my eating disorder, they were giving me like a paper with some like, how do you say, boxes, where it says like, if you can like do a check mark in every box, you have an eating disorder. And I was reading through, and I said that, I asked that, but I'm not sure because I have diabetes. So I always have to think of what I'm putting in my mouth.
Yeah.
I can't just let it go. So am I going to have an eating disorder for the rest of my life? Am I ever going to be like a healthy person again? And what is a healthy person in the combination with food when you are a type 1? So I feel like more people who have diabetes maybe have like an unhealthy relationship to food.
Yeah.
Even if they don't think about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think the term eating disorder, it's a difficult term, isn't it? Because you know, it's a relationship that you have with food and how you manage food and how, but it, you know, I think the term eating disorder just doesn't, I don't know if it sits that well with me, because it sort of has a negative connotation in that it's a disorder, but
yeah.
But in a sense, again, it's like we all have some level of complexity with food, or we all have, you know, we all have issues with food, right? Who doesn't like to, you know, eat a bag of chips and feel guilty about it afterwards, right? You know, it's
But then
really,
you have to go back to yourself and feel like, do I like to eat the bag of chips? If yes, do it. If not, why do you do it? Because I feel I'm talking a lot of the balance, the important balance in life. And I feel like I've had a few like discussions with other who have like type 1 diabetes, and they're like so angry, like they can't eat candy like their friends can. And I was like, how are they eating candy? And they're like, they can eat like a box of candy and I can't. And I was like, they don't eat a box of candy every day and they don't feel good afterwards. And they're like, no, they don't. And I was like, no. So just enjoy a few pieces and you will feel like satisfied. You don't have to eat like a box of like anything. You don't have to eat whole pizza if you don't. But if you have to like do it in a balanced way, and you can still enjoy the good stuff in life.
Yeah, there really isn't any there really isn't any limitations on being a type 1 diabetic, right? I mean, aside from maybe, I don't know, what really couldn't a type 1 diabetic do? I mean, they couldn't go somewhere where they need insulin, they can't have it. And I don't know where those places exist. I mean, I'm sure you could be an astronaut and have type 1 diabetes, right? I'm sure there's probably, yeah, there's maybe a few, but very, very few limitations. So how long did the, and I imagine there's still some element of psychology that you're working with around food, but like how long did the more difficult period last for?
Well, I'm not sure. I feel like I think it started a few years earlier than I was 25 before 25. But like I'm feeling like so grateful for having this period in my life, because then I had to think that how important it is for me and my everyday life to make choices for myself, not for anyone else. And see that it is important to actually enjoy to hang out with friends, to enjoy having a glass of wine or the pizza or bread for breakfast or anything else, like an ice cream when it's summer. So I think this is something I have to think of, like every day of, and try to remember how lucky I am. Can I say that?
Yeah, totally.
To actually have like all my friends back, my family is still supportive, and to have like this community, it's fantastic.
Yeah, and I think it's fantastic. When did your interest in sharing a story, being open about it on social media, and working in and supporting the community, when did that come about?
I felt like when I was in hospital when I was 25 for my eating disorder, I felt so ashamed, and I was like, this is not who I am. I don't want to be here. and so on. So I think that when I was starting to feeling healthy again and to have the energy to do something more in my life than just thinking of what time it is and when's the time for lunch, I was starting to think that, okay, I have to talk more about this, about diabetes and eating disorders. So that was the starting point for me to open up my social media again. And when I got so many like messages and feedback of people who were like, oh my God, I'm so happy you are talking about this. I'm not sure how to do in my country, who to talk to, who to get help from, and so on. So that was the starting point, like 1-2 years after.
And it's, I imagine, well, get that process of giving back, right? Of not just focusing on yourself, but like supporting others and kind of giving to something outside of yourself, I imagine also, well, I just imagine it's helpful, right? It gives back to you, right? You give out and you receive for that.
Yeah.
So how's that experience been, like being open and transparent on social media about sensitive topics? What's that been like for you?
It is scary to actually be open to people who are like, you don't even know who it is watching like your Instagram or your stories or so on. But to do it like once and to get some kind of feedback. And then you notice that people want to see the real life. They don't want to see like it can be a balance between like fashion pictures and like, now I'm having a drink by the ocean, blah, blah. But I think that people want to see the real and the real you. And no, life has its ups and downs. Like I don't feel happy every day, but no one does.
Yeah.
Like that's in general, like people everywhere.
Yeah, you say that. It's I think the social media work, there's certainly a lot of courage in there to be open, right? And to share your story at the risk of whatever comes back. So that takes a lot of courage, but also just the, taking your own time to invest in the community and support the community also is like a really, it's your time, right? And you're choosing to give it to other people and other causes. And that's, I think it's easy to look at that work and just not really always understand and think about, you've chosen to take that Saturday and do that thing for that community rather than, do things for yourself. And I think that's, it's really commendable.
Yeah.
So we touched a bit earlier on this idea of perfection. Did that kind of play a role, like in the food and in the psychology around food? And I know, like myself, recently I went through a period where my levels were really high, and they were just high for maybe 6 months. And I think that my insulin sensitivity has declined, right? Yeah. And I was sort of letting them be high. I was kind of choosing or allowing to have my levels just be high for a while, because ultimately, because perfection's not possible, right? And perfection being in that range 100% of the time, because that is just not even a possibility. You almost, mentally I had to go, right, well, I've been choosing to be high. I almost had to choose to go, look, I probably need to have a few more hypos.
Yeah.
I probably need to choose the lower side of perfection for this point in time. And so that has made me realize that because we can't choose perfection, we kind of have to choose one side or the other, and it varies, right? It varies moment to moment, day to day, month to month, et cetera, et cetera. But at the moment, I'm choosing to be low. So I've like I have to have my lollies with me a bit more often. And, you know, I have, like last week, I'm having more hypos. Tell me about, you know, this kind of concept. I think you touch on it as well in your social media, but this concept of perfection. Talk me through your thoughts on that.
Yeah, but I feel like what is perfection? And a person without diabetes, what is perfection for them? I mean, no one is perfect. And to have diabetes, and like, I feel like the main goal is to keep your blood sugar stable in some way. And if it is a little bit higher, a little bit lower, maybe that's perfect for you. But life is an ongoing thing. I mean, life is here and now. And if today has been a really shitty day, well, take a moment and just accept that, because in a few hours, it's a new day, and that could be a really great day. So I don't think we can't think too much about like the highs or the lows or the bad things about having type 1 diabetes. We have to focus on the things we really like and to make something good about it, because life is really beautiful. When you're meeting new people, when you like we were talking about traveling before. I mean, yeah, hanging out with friends you love, with your family, that's perfection for me. To like be able to laugh out loud with my friends.
Yeah.
And I have no idea what my blood sugar is, but if I'm having a good time, it doesn't matter. Like, I think we have to change the focus sometimes, and don't be so control over what number am I having at the moment and what number is I'm having in about 10 minutes.
Like, yeah, I was actually reflecting on this earlier because, and this happens occasionally, right? I was at a friend's place last night, just me and two other guys, just hanging out, listening to music, having a few beers, and then today, it's not like earlier on today, I was reflecting on the night, and I was like, I don't remember what my blood sugar was last night. I mean, I could look at it and see what it was, and it was good, right, the whole night. But that, you know, it's actually, it's a little bit unsettling, right, to go, I didn't think about my blood sugars for like 5 hours.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't look, I didn't check. And like, I don't know, it's almost like you become not a diabetic for that period of time, right? It's like you forgot that you're a diabetic for a moment, which is a really nice feeling.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have to think sometimes that, okay, I am a type 1, and what should I do to manage my blood sugar in the best way? Of course, we have to like still manage our blood sugar in somehow. But yeah, but I like what you're saying. Like, we can't like you said, like I have no idea what I had last night, but I had fun. That's the important thing.
It is. And you know, interestingly, people who wear continuous glucose monitors or check their blood sugar, you almost have a tool that tells you that you're not perfect in a sense. Whereas I'm trying to think of like a non-diabetic who's not checking their blood sugar. You know, like, I suppose perfection just becomes about, I don't know, neat handwriting or how your desk looks, or, you know, these other kind of more esoteric things, where with blood sugar, it's a very exact thing, right? So you're very much told every time you check, are you being perfect in this moment, or are you not being perfect? So I suppose it could potentially lead to, you know, people being overly pedantic about that, right? And being too controlling with trying to find that perfection. And I suppose that you probably would have to have some type of inclination or something, you know, in your psychology already that it triggers, right? Like if you already wanted to be controlling in some ways and you now have this tool to help you be more controlling, it might magnify that part of you.
Yeah. And I feel like when you are thinking of how, because I have, a few years ago, I had these discussions with a young girl, and I was asking her out for dinner, and she was a type 1. And she said, oh, what time it is? And I was like, okay, we are meeting up my friends at 7. So we might have dinner at 8:30. It's a late. It's because it was Saturday. And she was like, oh, no, I can't. And I was like, okay, but are you sure you don't want to come? She was like, no, I have to have dinner at 6 o'clock. And I was like, what? Can't you like take a sandwich or something, some snacks before if you're hungry? I mean, I have diabetes as well, and I get hungry even if I don't have a low blood sugar.
Yeah.
It was like, no, because my doctor said to me, like, I have to have like dinner at 6, breakfast at 8, and lunch around 11, 12. And I was like, can't you like change that? She was like, no. And then I was starting to think over that, because I think as a type 1 diabetic, it is good to have like routines and like a daily, because it's easier to manage your blood sugar in that way.
Totally. Yeah.
But some days you want to feel like you can be spontaneously, and to have a late dinner, or to have like snacks someday, or chips or whatever. And that shouldn't be a problem.
No, there should definitely, well, look, I mean, I think, again, it's very individual. You can't generalize, but hopefully people can see that it's as important to enjoy your life, you know, because you're only controlling your blood sugar to prolong your life.
Yeah.
You know, and then that's a very blunt way of putting it, right? But what's the point in prolonging your life if you're not going to enjoy it a little bit along the way?
Yeah. And your diabetes won't kill you if you have a high blood sugar for a few hours.
Totally. And I think that, like, you know, if we look back at, we know, right? We can look back at data and we can see that type 1 diabetics live shorter lives on average, right? We know that. But, you know, I also know type 1 diabetics right now who've had it since they were kids, who are like 80 and 90 years old.
Yeah.
And that's from a time when treatments were very rudimentary, right? You know, the whole process of insulin and monitoring blood sugar there was a point when I used to test it you had to test urine in order to know what your blood sugar was. But where am I going with this? My point is that now that we have this technology, there's a good chance that the life expectancy of a type 1 diabetic isn't that much less now. And I imagine that we're catching up with the general population. It's kind of a weird way to put it, but you know, I like to think we're catching up with the general population anyway.
Yeah, and I'm so happy because I have an old friend. She's 63, I think, and she has been a type 1 diabetic for 54 years.
Yeah.
And when she was diagnosed with diabetes, she was having like 1 shot a day only. Yeah. And she is living her life at the moment. And I feel like, yeah, it is possible.
Yeah, it's totally possible. So I think, yeah, you're right. It's really good to remind, particularly younger people with type 1 diabetes. It's good to remind them that, you know, with the tools that we have now, you definitely have got more of a license to enjoy your life.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if we mentioned in this chat, but I know that your dad has type 1 diabetes, and I imagine that, well, put it this way, I would love to have a dad who had type 1 diabetes, because I imagine it's not really nice to have that support.
Yeah, and a funny story, I was in France this summer together with my dad, and he had we were traveling from Stockholm, where I'm living. So he came the day before and had like a sleepover. And so we took the car to the airport. And when we arrived to our Airbnb room, he said that, Sarah, I forgot my how do you say the bathroom bag? How do you say the
toiletry bag? Yeah.
Toilet? Yeah. And I was like, oh, but we can go out and buy you a new toothbrush because I had the paste here with me, and you can borrow from me. Yeah. He was like, well, my insulin was in there. I was like, holy fuck. Okay, what insulin are you using? I have with me, so you can have my pens.
Yeah.
So he got a insulin pen for me, and he was like, I'm so happy my daughter has type 1 diabetes as I do. And I was like, okay. What a loving parent. Yeah.
Yeah, really lucky. And did he have it when you were diagnosed, actually?
No. So he got it when he was 54, after me.
Wow. So how long has he had it for?
So he's 68 now, I think.
Okay. Oh, wow. That's kind of fascinating. I mean, what's the... that's very late onset, isn't it?
At that time, when he got his diagnosis, it was kind of weird thing, because the media says like you get type 1 diabetes when you're a child, right? But now when I see and hear people like you got your diagnosis when you were 30. Yeah. And my friend, she got her type 1 diagnosis when she was, I think 27, 28. So, and my dad when he was 54. And I feel like more and more people are getting type 1 diabetes in an older age. And he doesn't have, It's
incredibly sympathetic of him.
Yeah.
To get diabetes to support you.
But then we can talk about it. And he said that he can say that he's happy that he got his type 1 because now he can relate how I was feeling when I got my diagnosis. And like, life isn't easy with diabetes sometimes, but we can handle it together. Yeah. So we are. Yeah.
That's, I think, a really good message to start to wrap up on. I just want to compliment you again on the courage that it takes to put out there the type of information that you do, because I do think it will make a difference, in people's lives who read it, who, need some support. And I think generally the way that you speak in social media is incredibly philosophical. It's inquisitive, and I think it's a really nice style. So thank you for putting yourself out there like that. It's I think on behalf of the community in general, it's appreciated.
Thank you so much, Pete.
It's okay.
I was really you're doing. Yeah.
It's really nice to talk to you, and I really appreciate your time.